And now he's coding. I didn't do much.
What was the application? I didn't really understand what it was.
He's now we're going to steal the idea.
Yes.
So he has an idea of making a marketplace for kids who want to teach elderly people things, because that's what he did for his summer job. So there's some kind of marketplace which started out by him teaching elderly people about tech, and then it evolved into something more like maybe gardening, maybe something else.
And then when you say elderly, do you mean people like us, or more?
Everyone beyond 30.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit older.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so they need to have some front end, and you fix the back end with some database or something, and some APIs. Or
So now he's with his mom this week, and I'm calling in sometimes and say, well, do you need help with anything? No, I got this. Me and Claude, we can do this. So
and he uses Cursor as well to develop, or?
That's the next step. I'm evaluating Cursor myself. I think it takes a little bit of getting to know it. I think he could be ready for it soon, but it's you have to think a little bit differently.
So the angle here is, of course, that traditional programming without any support, not really interesting. Having a good idea of an app, and then having AI supported, AI oriented, like.
He knows what he wants, and he's never been interested in coding, but it's a means to an end, and this is his way to get to what he wants.
And just elaborate a little bit around the toolbox you gave him, and what is actually how is he working with it?
Right, so I set up VS Code for him, and GitHub, and Flutter is the technology he's using. And then he's just prompting Claude to implement this feature now. Sometimes he maybe gives an image of what he wants in the front end, and then Claude.
And what is Claude?
So Claude is a competitor to OpenAI, or rather to ChatGPT, by the company Anthropic.
So it's Anthropic's Claude.
Yes, and this is currently the best coding LLM out there.
This was interesting. As a matter of fact, no. Why did you give him Claude?
Because it's better. I tried it myself. I moved from OpenAI to
define
Anthropic.
better, or define on what criteria you found Claude better.
For me, it was I started to code the project, and then I needed help on how do I structure this, because I evolved recently from a data scientist to more of an engineer, and I realized that my code became spaghetti. And then I asked Claude, and very quickly it taught me about separation of concerns, something I never got from OpenAI. And then it's like, wow, this is really one step beyond.
I agree. I think Claude is much better for coding as well. Would you agree, Luka or Salla?
No.
Oh, that is interesting. Let's start here.
Claude is more pleasant to talk. GPT-4o can be a bit verbose, and but when it comes to sort of raw reasoning and
but for coding,
for coding,
Claude is better for coding. Yes.
No. GPT-4o definitely.
And what are you basing that on?
I use both.
You use both, and when you've thrown tasks at it, or you have had problems, and you find more to the point.
And we did some also some quantitative experiments where we sort of measured on its sort of productivity increase, and how quickly and percentage of how many problems people were able to solve from start to finish with.
And is any one of our listeners would like to, form their own opinion on this, what would you recommend as the short list of 4 or 5 to try out? Like now we've talked about Anthropic with Claude, we've talked about ChatGPT 4o.
Yes.
And what else?
There are those
for coding.
I mean, if you want state of the art.
Gemini is behind a bit, right?
Gemini is behind?
But I would say Grok 2 is actually coming up there.
It's
for
better.
coding.
What about Mistral for coding?
It's open source. It's not really there. It's not a frontier model in that sense, I would say.
My go-to for evaluating for coding is the There's an agent framework called AIDR, and they have a leaderboard for the best LLMs to choose with AIDR. And there, Claude is the top. GPT-4o is not far behind. But they also have DeepSeek Coder, which is interesting. It's an open source. I guess it's based on Llama, but I'm not sure. But that seems to be also very good for coding.
But I think in general, this kind of, it's a really interesting question, like how do you benchmark the models? And I mean, if I think about like the evolution of deep learning in the beginning, when we had MNIST and the different sort of benchmarks that were put out there, it sort of, yes, it increased creativity in some sense, but then, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of researchers who got really frustrated that it was just sort of trying to get some parameter a little bit better, because then you could get it published in ICML. So in some sense, I'm kind of happy that we don't have the benchmarks, but at the same time, it gives rise to these sort of academic emotional discussions about which one is better, and then you prefer one maybe.
But it's also that the standard benchmarks that are used are not the least bit representative of real-world coding.
Yeah.
No, because now we get to the next topic, define the cycle of coding. Where does it start and where does it end, and what do you really want help with? Because if I take the example that you want to structure code, this is part of the design step, okay? Not the actual coding step, right? So I think horses for courses. It could be that, some is good at reasoning with or giving you hints on how you should think, whilst other is hardcore coding. So I think the whole discussion becomes you need to go one step deeper, I guess.
And I would say for discussions about something, I definitely prefer Claude to the things that are open have been released publicly from OpenAI.
Because it's too verbose.
It's too verbose. But what's sort of one typical problem with these systems is that they're getting this increased context, so this shorter memory. And the way that these models work, which are attention-based transformers, is essentially that they focus on different parts in that context. And the longer it is, the more it spreads its attention. And there have been benchmarks for this, called like needle in the haystack. Can you find something specific? But that's like a very wrong test. The problem comes when you have nearly identical things covering the entire context, like a code. You're repeating, sort of iterating. Then having it to really focus on the right thing and not go off on a tangent on something that you discussed before or something like that. That's, I think,
interesting.
I think another interesting benchmark, just to dwell on that, is the SWE bench, where they have GitHub issues, and then it's meant for agents. So you're supposed to take a GitHub issue, produce a PR, merge it, and see if it works.
But isn't that a good direction for benchmark? Going from really small prediction-based benchmarks to something that you have a much more complicated task to fulfill, like solving an issue in a GitHub repo.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So we're state-of-the-art is now on 30% of this, which says something about where we are in AI for coding.
How much do you think you personally would score?
I don't know. I wouldn't dare guess. This is all different programming languages, so I wouldn't score anywhere near that.
No. Just getting back and closing your story, perhaps, about your kid getting into coding without having coded anything before, now getting super excited and engaged about building his idea together with you, but still he does his own thing with AI. I think one interesting note on this is what Sam Altman and others have been speaking about. There will be a point when we'll have the first single-person unicorn company, a single person that builds all the system and actually becomes a unicorn company. I think when they bought, was it Instagram? There were like 16 people, and it was a unicorn company or something. That was a very few number of people, but
What's up the same way?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I think, in general, I'm always fascinated by the argument that you can just throw more people on a problem and it'll solve it better. Yeah, I think, so I worked for IKEA for 2 years, and they really wanted to rebuild the web completely. And actually, it ended up being a team of 6 people that built the foundation that everything is built on now. And it's fantastic quality. And when I spoke to some of the fantastic people in that team, they said that one of the keys was that they weren't too many people.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Throwing people at some problem may not always be the right solution.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
There was, speaking of Anthropic, there was an article I think yesterday that they published where they detailed their process of building a core feature of Claude, their web app called Artifacts, which is that generates a document on the side rather than have it in the chat. It sort of does it on the side, can run JavaScript and so on. And that was done by a tiny team, like 3-4 people over 2 months or something, 2-3 months. Using AI, of course.
It's just a prompt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just prompting to get that the artifact up.
But there is more to it, and I don't have like a great answer to this because I've wasted a lot of time when coding, going just doing what the AI tells me, and then no, this doesn't work. Try again, and sort of iterate. At some point, when it gets stuck into something, you can end up wasting a lot of time if you don't know where to pull out from. Yeah.
Awesome. Should we do the
I think we do an introduction.
Yeah. So very welcome everyone. We have the first podcast of this season, and it's going to be a very improvised as usual, like a summer recap. So with us today we have 3 experts in AI. That we're just going to have a panel, basically, discussing, what we think are the most, interesting highlights of the summer and perhaps the year in AI. But before we do that, let's go around the table and do a quick introduction. And Luka, do you want to start? Can you give a very brief introduction to who you are?
Sure. My name is Luka Crnkovic-Friis, and I'm the head of AI and ML at King, the makers of Candy Crush. Is also now part of Microsoft.
Right. And previously a founder of Peltorian, and for disclosure, I worked with you as well before, and it was a great pleasure, and I consider you one of the top AI experts that I know, so it's a great honor.
Thank you, Anders.
And I need to give a shout out that when the whole craziness of generative AI started, like you were the ones who that I found in the whole media buzz globally, almost, that I try this, I try that, and you made very, very concrete comments and reflections on why this works and how, of that experience. We shared quite a bit around that experience on, for instance, LinkedIn, which I found really refreshing, that someone is not just talking about it, but hardcore experimenting with it and finding its limitations, and you were doing that really early on. So thank you for that.
And actually building applications on neural networks before they were popular and everything. Yeah. So it's impressive, I think.
Yeah, because you came into the whole topic of knowing with Peltorian and everything, how we used to do it, so to speak, and how can you now push it. So I found that really good.
I got lucky in sort of choosing the right area.
Yeah, essentially. You could say that.
Salla, please introduce yourself.
I'm not sure it was luck. My name is Salla Franzén. I'm currently an investment manager at Navigare Ventures. Have a background in theoretical math and worked in finance and furniture, building AI and machine learning solutions.
Funding and furniture in IKEA, I guess.
Yeah, and the first time you were here, I think it was almost the first season. Yeah. Then you were chief data scientist at SAB. Yeah. Yeah, so you worked a lot with these topics in the financial sector in many different things to on many angles, from research to very, very practical, building teams, everything like this. And then you decided to furniture over funding, right? And then you moved to Amsterdam for a while, right? Yeah. So you had that whole experience.
Yeah, and I learned how to build data and insights and AI systems for e-commerce. Which is very new for me.
How I never got when you were at IKEA. How did you frame your domain or your scope in terms of analytics and AI and data for IKEA?
In the beginning, I was supposed to be just sort of leading a team building price recommendations, but quite quickly, I became responsible for data and analytics on the web and the app and kind of everything customer facing in the stores.
Okay, so the customer-facing domains.
Yeah, the fun part. The one you can show to people. This is what my team built. Isn't it cool?
I mean, you're a super senior, data scientist or AI expert, I would say. Been part of so many national initiatives, and we met each other so many times during, AI, Swedish AI agenda and AI Sweden and so many other things, and public speaker and everything. So it's a pleasure to have you here as well.
And your domains you're looking at now.
Yeah.
What are they?
So now So Navigare Ventures invests in science-based innovation, which is super fun. I get to meet like really excellent researchers around Sweden and try to identify if what they're doing is relevant for risk capital and whether we like each other and how we can support them really. And so I focus on everything related to AI, quantum, not just quantum technologies, but quantum physics and mechanics and chemistry and everything, because I think that's a super fascinating area. And then cybersecurity and some sort of hardware stuff as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
So you picked the cherries, right?
I'm lucky. It's pure luck.
And
Once
also,
again, I don't think it's so much luck here.
Jesper, welcome here, and please introduce
Thank you.
yourself as well.
Jesper Fredriksson. I have a team, a data science and AI team at Volvo Cars, and we're focusing mainly on generative AI. Before that, I've been data scientist for a long time and have a background in medical imaging and brain research.
Right.
So medical imaging and brain research to M.
Yeah.
Mobility for a while there.
Yeah, that's
so you were
that's a
at one part of Volvo on an arm's length,
yes.
but now that's not an arm's length anymore.
No, we got pulled into the main company.
The motherhood took you out.
Yeah.
You were so good and so sharp, so everything we want you back. Yeah, closer.
It was a change of mind, going from having less cars on the streets to selling more cars. Electric though.
But it's a super interesting journey because it's really delving into the fundamentals of transport. Thinking about transport, and then can we servitize this? And now this story is still of course there, but it's the full automotive story now as well.
Yeah, so I got the chance to work with generative AI, and that couldn't be only in Volvo On Demand, so it's natural to move to Volvo
It's
Cars.
bigger than that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to have a person like you that worked with a real application of generative AI, actually putting that in production as well at the company that is of the size of Volvo as well. But I also appreciate your previous experience in TV4 and also some AI conferences in the past in Vienna and whatnot that I had vague memories of, but I know it was.
I'm sure we had fun.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So it's an honor to have all of you here, and we're going to, Henrik, try to keep it to like a bit shorter episodes this season, but I'm sure we're going to fail.
Yeah. Okay. We're gonna go out of the marathon league and into the more exciting, shorter.
Yes.
Trying to be more, maybe easier to digest.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
We will fail.
We're mainly here to have fun and speak about what we love. So
It's going to be too much fun in an hour to shut this down. I promise you.
Yeah.
We can aim for 100 meters and end up at 1,000 or 5,000.
Yeah, a marathon for sure. Okay, should we start with trying to see, can we identify some kind of general trends, something that we've seen during 2024, perhaps something that has been especially clear during the summer times of where the field of AI is going? I'm sure we can all think about some trends that we've seen, but anyone that wants to start, some clear trend that we can see of how the AI field is moving.
We touched briefly on the AI hype cycle. That's something to start with, maybe.
Yeah, please elaborate.
So there's been a massive spend on GPUs, and NVIDIA stock is higher than ever. And
It's reached its second most valuable company now, right?
I'm not sure where they are, but they're up there.
Right. Yeah.
And basically, the rest of the companies are still struggling to see any gains from AI. And I guess that's.
Are you
that's
sure
the
about
reason.
that, by the way?
I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but that's the official story at least. That is why people think that we're now in the, what is it called, the trough.
Going towards the trough.
Oh.
And I saw this argument, and that someone said we were already past the peak, or not past the peak. So are we on the peak or on the past? But it's been pouring a lot of money in, but the show me the money call has been made. So that means somewhere here it needs to get real.
Yeah.
But if I understand you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but we can certainly see a lot of progress being made in AI.
Yes.
One progress is in the field of science, another can be in engineering, and the third can be in business. And I guess if I understand you correctly, you're thinking more of the business side of things
Yes, definitely.
Right.
But it's also maybe the realization that we all have that things aren't moving as quickly as in 2023 in the early days of the ChatGPT boom. But then again, things can change quickly. If rumors about OpenAI releasing stuff are true, then this could change quickly.
But I have a theory what is happening, why we're getting delusioned, and how we are confusing ourselves. And you can lean on Joseph Schumpeter's definition of disruption or innovation from the, I guess, 20s and 30s. And he makes the distinction between the technical invention, flipping a technical invention, a technique, into something that can be sort of commercially monetized. He calls that innovation. And then ultimately to make that go broad into the masses, to really take off, we are talking about, he used the word diffusion. So invention, innovation, diffusion. And I think that there is a huge speed of invention of techniques, and we are, research, and we're getting, we can talk about, those topics. But just because you have the technique is not the same as you have usage, or you have understood how you bring value from it. Yeah. So we have all these companies that are fantastic at the technique, but now we need to figure out where to place that technique to innovate, and then ultimately when we're done that, we're going to change all the people's ways of working to adopt it. Then we have diffusion.
So maybe, sorry, no, because this really rings a bell with me. I mean, for me, the whole sort of launch of ChatGPT was incredibly frustrating, because it just reminded me of when deep learning came, and it was impossible to hire really good data scientists who were willing to do not deep learning. and I mean, I hear from so many of my friends who work in companies that what happened last year was that they centralized the data science teams again. Oh. And for me, the most successful implementation of a data science team is that it's out in the organization. It's working naturally in parts of teams. It's like co-creating things that are needed for the business and for the customers.
Yeah. Touching an interesting topic. Should it only be embedded, or should it have a hybrid kind of organization?
I think hybrid, because I think there are things where you really benefit from having like a hive mind central team that keeps in touch and can keep sort of the cutting edge of awareness, and then infuse the other teams with it.
That's how we built it at King also. We have a central AI.
I think we should add this as a topic, organization.
I would like to comment on the previous thing, which
please.
I would like to offer a contrary opinion.
So,
Salla, do you remember those Ericsson roundtables, AI roundtables? Yeah. So this was where you have various top sort of major Swedish companies meeting once quarterly, discussing AI. And a few years ago, there were two very distinct categories. So sort of you had the old school established companies, and then you had a few like Spotify, you had us from Piltarion, and generally it was the older companies asking the newer, like, oh, how are you doing it with this, with data, with AI, and so on. There was a very clear gap. Now, I attended one of these like a year ago, 6 months, a year ago, and the difference is massive. The field has been leveled. So you have these companies like AIAW, who are essentially, when it comes to generative AI, we're essentially on the same level. We're investigating sort of the same things and so on. Because suddenly you don't need to put in all of that energy to get the data and build up all the infrastructure. It's an API you call. Right. So the sort of democratization of AI, which sort of was very, very, very important, it has happened. Yeah. And it's had at least on the practical day-to-day and the capability of
it's fantastic. I was talking to the CEO of ATG, I think, and he was like, well, we have an AI strategy and we're doing all these things. And I was like mind blown. Like a company like ATG, they're gambling on horses. That's their business. They have a super good AI strategy.
Perhaps that's a good like side effect of ChatGPT, that at least it brought AI to the mindset of every company. Yeah. And they had to develop an AI strategy, and they had to get some kind of AI team in place, and they had to let people start using AI. Or are you skeptical, Salla?
Maybe. because I think, I mean, for me, AI is so much more than large language models, and I think the challenge is
it's just the event, you know.
Yeah.
I agree what you said before. Of course, it's just a small fraction of AI, but still, the media attention that it gave had some positive side effects.
Yeah, absolutely. But and yes, and I think it's a fantastic example of pedagogically making AI systems available for the many, and for them to be able to try out stuff and learn how a machine would speak to you and things like that. But I still think that it's sort of, I'm always interested about what people aren't talking about. So I'm really trying to kind of keep that part alive. And there I think you still have a lot of really interesting information or insights coming from like neuroscience, where those kinds of algorithms might actually be hugely beneficial in unexpected places. And I think large language models that we can see are useful in some cases, like learning how to grasp something or being able to implement a fantastic internal search function and things like that. But I think there are parts where we still need to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But I think in some ways it's a little bit like, oh, now the new hype is a hammer. So all of a sudden we need to use a hammer for every single mathematical or data problem. And that's, of course, you know, use a screwdriver when you need a screwdriver. The AI tool set is more techniques than the generative or large language models approaches.
But
maybe that gets lost. Is that your point here, maybe?
Yeah, and it's an interesting dynamic where you have incredibly talented people that have built a fantastic machine learning algorithm that's in production and the customers are loving it, and the manager says, oh, it's not a large language model, but then it's not AI.
That's frustrating.
It's a bit silly.
But I think we all agree that large language models is not the solution to all of AI.
No.
Yeah, but then is the point, going back to the hype cycle, is that referring to AI or is it referring to generative AI and particularly large language models type AI?
I think it's about generative AI. That's what people mean when they say AI today.
Yeah. So interesting, right? So the definition of AI, we were a little bit confused about it and we were discussing it in a different way 2 years ago.
It's fantastic.
And now it's sharp. Now generative AI is AI.
Exactly. Machine learning and AI, it's super simple. What was complex before of separating now, at least when I say AI, I mean generative AI and machine learning.
Isn't that interesting that the definition is almost cleaned up itself up?
But just to also build, I think, what you said, I think a year ago, Luka, and think about the adoption, if we call it that, about generative AI. And one thing we could see is the big tech giants were taking this kind of large language model and integrating them into all their products, into the Office suite, into the operating system of Windows, into the coding and development environment, and so forth. And I think if please correct me if I'm wrong, but you said something like, it is super simple to integrate them because it's simply you put in text to the model and it's being integrated as a co-pilot or some kind of assistant, and it's just text and it's super simple to integrate. Would you agree? Is that what you said?
Absolutely. And then there's always easy to underestimate the engineering complexities and how people can screw up the building products.
So then let's float the contrary argument if it's easy or not. I saw Lars Albertsson made a nice presentation. Lars Albertsson is a good friend of all of us. He's a super engineer, data engineer, and he's clearly arguing if you want to do enterprise grade machine learning or AI, that is robust and in critical systems. He argues that it's way more complex engineering around this in order to build a robust system. So now we need to go away from how we can utilize to increase the individual's productivity with generative AI tools. And I can, like I give you a laptop, I can give you Claude, and you can be more productive. But if I want to build enterprise-grade systems with this, with APIs and managing the data, and it cannot hallucinate, blah, blah, blah. So I saw some slides where he sort of highlighted, yes, to do this is easy, but if you do this and this and this and this, and then he was referencing to the technical depth of machine learning again, that Google wrote in 2015, and it's used way more. So it all depends on how you frame this, if it's easy or not, in my opinion.
But it is a difference, I would say, to
There is a
use
difference.
generative. There is, to traditional machine learning, generative AI has a big difference, I would say.
The way I think about it is generative AI is more like software development because you're generally calling an API. But there is a difference in the unpredictability what is the word, non-determinism in the results. You have to stochasticness, and you have the control for various factors, and then you end up in something like LLM ops or ML ops, where you have to control things over time, and when you evolve the model, make sure that the examples that you can handle before, you're still handling them when you make an update, and etc. That's the main difference, and that's to me at least.
But have you in any way simplified the core fundamentals of feeding the right data? So if you want to do that, something in an enterprise price
I think
setting,
so, actually.
Yes. But don't you need to feed the right data?
No, not in the same way, I would say.
Not in the same way, is correct.
Yeah.
And the reason is basically that you actually don't have to train models as much as you did before. You can use models that's pre-trained and just prompt them. Okay. And that works not for every use case, and it's not going to be super great, but you can get started doing that, and that significantly simplifies the adoption of AI.
I still think Candic has a point in that it's only as good as your data is. Yeah. You don't have the same requirements on structured data, but it still needs to be good quality data. If I'm querying some database or accessing some structured or unstructured data, if the data is not what I think it is, then it's going to be wrong, and no matter what.
Further, I mean, large language models are not good when you have massive amounts of data, just like humans are not. You have the same type of limitation. But also, I think a bit of perspective here is that sort of the state-of-the-art LLMs now, which is Claude and GPT-4. GPT-4 is a 2.5-year-old model. It is not the state-of-the-art. What's actually, but there is a big process of where for GPT Next, it's red testing, it's going through a number of things to make it more safe. So a lot of the assumptions about the limitations and so on that we sort of are baking in are not going really be valid with the next generation of models, which are coming soon.
Yes.
And I think I'm sitting here thinking about how to frame this, because it's going to sound like I'm name dropping, so I'm going to name drop. I was in Silicon Valley in February, and I met with Mark Andreessen. And it was like a really nice fireside chat where we were, 25 people in the room, and we could ask questions. And he said that he sees it as, like, computers used to be deterministic, and then you have massive amounts of use for it, but now we're moving into the probabilistic era. And so people need to learn statistics, which makes me incredibly worried, because we all know how good people tend to be at statistics. But you actually have to start to question the computer, and that isn't something that, like, my generation necessarily would naturally do. Hopefully they would. Not everybody is a statistician and interested in actually sort of verifying the answers that you get.
But this is a huge problem, because ultimately the way we understand how to run business, organize business, plan business is fundamentally rooted in deterministic thought.
Yes,
and we now need to switch to a probabilistic emergent view.
And I would like to pitch my idea that I'm pitching everywhere. I think that when you use large language models, you should have an avatar, and it should be like an uncle, and then depending on how unsure the uncle is, the more drunk he is. Because I think that's a very human approach. So I think we need to find the human approach of explaining the probabilistic
the drunk avatar.
But I would say that the human processes are deterministic. They're not really, but we like to pretend that they are.
No, I fully agree. Humans and how we should really, what we should be doing is not deterministic, but what has become management dogma, and how we have understood and tried to model the world, value chain, division of labor, all these things is very deterministic to solve a problem in a very steady state. Right. And we are super bad at dynamic adaptability because of this. So the whole management school of thought, the whole idea how we organize, how we think about this, that flips us into agentic and agency topics and all this. I think this is all related.
And it's interesting when you sort of turn to sort of start looking at human behavior, because you sort of come into insights. There's this linguist, famous one, Emily Bender, something like that, who invented the term stochastic parrots, super critical of LLMs. Yes. And I always think that criticism is really pointing in the wrong direction. The more it's like, wow, humans are really this shallow that we operate kind of close this very primitive thing that we've automated. And I'm getting more and more of that impression now, especially with diffusion models, now with music. It's remarkable what has happened. Now, once upon a time, I studied classical composition in parallel to electrical engineering. And what these models can do, I mean, people go years and years in school to learn. They're like, things that you consider were complex and sublime, it just creates. And right now, actually, I'm listening more to AI-generated stuff for Udio than I'm listening to Spotify.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Not because it's AI-generated, but I actually like it.
What do you think is going to happen to the lawsuits against Udio and Suno?
Oh, this is almost like changing topics soon, right?
Popcorn.
Okay, why don't we? Okay, the first topic started off with understanding or thinking about where are we on the AI hype cycle. So can we sort of just wrap up? Do we have an opinion? Are we at the peak? Are we seeing the trough? Or how do we understand it?
We're at the early beginning of the exponential.
What do you mean? Going down first?
No, we're.
I mean, this is the latest one from Gartner, right?
Yeah.
Is it true? Is it there, or is it still on the peak?
No. So this is gonna sort of the next wave is going to hit.
Yeah. And then we're gonna Okay.
And if I understand you correctly, it's going to be big
Yeah.
advances very soon as well.
Yes.
I mean, I would agree. I think we're still in the innovation phase because I don't think we've found the right usages for the large language
I think
models
the whole productivity, the whole thing here is the difference between techniques versus innovation and diffusion. So when you go, you have the techniques and everybody's excited. We potentially can sense that something's in the air, but then we need to figure all this out in order to get value out of it. And that's what I think is where we are right now.
I'm very skeptical to the hype cycle in general.
We could even have that as its own. Should we kill the hype cycle in the magic quadrants while we're at it?
I think so.
Henrik, what do you think? Oh, sorry, Jesper. Should we? Yeah.
I just got a thought about the hype cycle. I think it's true in many things, but I'm thinking that AI is maybe not one of them.
So people should not stop investing in AI, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
No.
And it's also, it might represent some type of public market look at things.
We have a very cynical discussion on this that I can explain and we can discuss after. I have extremely cynical views on some of this stuff. Should we change topics, right?
Yes. Should we try to find another?
I have one, if I can steal it,
please.
or otherwise I want to give it to our guest first. Should I go? Can I go?
Yes.
Where do we stand now after summer in the war or in the arguments open source AI versus proprietary AI? Is someone moving ahead in the race? Is it more proprietary, or do we think that the open source is catching up, or has it already caught up? What do you think?
Who will win the race?
Who will win the race? Where are we in the race?
I mean, to start with, I think we all agree that the frontier models of today is very much into closed-sourced land, but there has been some huge
we have Llama.
improvements.
We have
There's
Llama
a lot of
3.1.
Wouldn't Llama be the 3.1 be the first example of a frontier open source
Yes.
model?
Yeah.
Yeah, and when was that released?
A month
Couple
ago.
of months, a
So
month
it's
or two. Yeah.
Summer
Yes.
news, right?
And it's still in training, right?
So it
So-
continues to improve, right?
Yeah, but there is a released version
Yeah.
now at least, but it's hard to get to use. I haven't been able to use it.
And I was just reading an article in The Economist about the kind of future of open source. Apparently, the Institute of Standards in the U.S. is sort of starting to define what open source is.
Oh.
And of course, Meta has a lot of opinions.
Yes.
Because, I mean, I think I've always been a great fan of open source, which I shouldn't say since I'm now a risk capitalist. But I still think I love the community aspect of it. And I love the fact that people come together and they help each other and they can build incredibly advanced software for others to use. But I think it's really interesting sort of point we're at. Will there be a third kind of coding standard? So you have open source and then you have proprietary and then something in between where you sort of do what Llama does, release parts of the code but not everything.
This is, I think, this is part of understanding where we stand in this race is also to acknowledge how the different vendors are butchering open source. Is it open weights? Is it fully published code? What is open source today? Meta Llama is not fully open source according to an Apache definition or whatever.
But it's also that you won't have, with the models, with the trajectory where we're heading today, you won't have any type of open thing without a Meta or somebody like that behind it.
No.
Because isn't that a good conclusion? I think that's really clear, that it will be a few set of companies that will produce the frontier models going forward, because no one else will have the money to do so.
Yeah. I mean, on Azure now, they're building, and this is public information. They're building a $10 billion computer.
Right.
$10 billion. Which also, I mean, I think also interesting side theme in this discussion is, for instance, Sweden in this.
Yes.
Or EU, if you want to be mean.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, because when I was in Silicon Valley at the same trip, so I haven't been there several times, I met with quite some really, really talented data scientists who'd been working for the big tech companies and building LLMs and things like that. And then they got bored with the administration, they got bored with all the meetings that you have to go to, so they decided to start their own things. And I think considering kind of the amount of money that still circulates in Silicon Valley, they might actually be able to do something interesting when they choose a niche where they know that they can actually contribute something incredibly interesting. So that's kind of a space that I think is
we have seen a couple of spin-offs lately this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Which one can we think about?
Well, I'm thinking about Augment.
Augment, yeah. That's a cool one.
Yeah.
So back to the question, open source, where do we stand?
I mean, you can think about the pros and cons. I guess that's one way to approach it. And you can think about, from a security point of view, what's the implications of actually releasing something open source. Jan would argue that it's actually good for security. A lot of people would argue the opposite. But then you can also think, from a more business model point of view, some open source projects actually do result in a very good business model that you can build on top of it. And then it comes to what you said, Salla, is some kind of hybrid approach where you have a business model that's built on open source solutions in some way, and that can actually be very beneficial as well. But it still seems, wouldn't you agree that the trend is, I think, I'm hard to say that, in some way the trend is to move more into closed and proprietary, at least for the tech giants?
I don't agree. I don't think it's that simple. My view of the analysis of the trend is that it's emerging two types of players with the money and the muscle that builds open source models, or builds large language models, I mean. So on the one hand side, we have the, I would argue then the OpenAI, who has the core idea, to make money and monetize on the model itself, or Anthropic. And then I think we have another style where you could argue Databricks or Meta, where they have another agenda with how they make money, and where they now want to feed and lock in people in their infrastructure, in their environment. So if I take the Databricks example, I think it's the best one here. I mean, they really want us to come into the Databricks community and environment and use their compute and use their storage. So that's their main game, right? So as long as we get into Databricks, we win, right? So that's why we put shoots a lot of money on trying to do our Mosaic-based LLM. So I think you can really see the difference between where the core business is LLM, or where, like in Meta, and then it's sort of part.
No, I would say that I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay.
I would say that there are many examples of more niched applications of LLMs, like Databricks, and then you have those that are shooting for AGI, and I would put Meta into that category.
Okay.
I don't think they will stop and say like, "Oh, this is practical."
Yeah, that's what they claim. Mark Zuckerberg says he wants to go for it. Yeah.
Okay, but then we can really categorize them. Who's trying to make money here and now with LLM only, who are trying to support their core business model, and who are hardcore shooting for AGI. Yeah. Can we categorize it like that?
Possibly. And then of course you have Microsoft.
Yeah.
That essentially does both.
Yes.
Amazon also to some extent, and Google, of course.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's the trend, to actually do both. And we know OpenAI started off as open and then went more and more closed, but they still have something, not much, but some models are actually still open source that they do release, like Whisper and stuff like that. So they went hybrid in some way. Google, of course, they have been rather closed, but they do release some models, and now they have Gemma combined with Gemini. I think Microsoft has the same, as you say. Meta is leading a bit on open source, but they haven't done that in the past, and I think they will stop doing it when it becomes too powerful as well. So,
but I sense here a little bit like, how should I frame this? What we are seeing now, open source in relation to LLMs, it doesn't really follow the traditional open source logic, like how we grown Linux and there were, how TensorFlow grew up and everything like that. Is like no way in hell anyone else could compete with hundreds of millions of developers doing that, because now you kind of need such a huge investment here somewhere. So the dynamics to discuss open source in LLMs cannot be the same as the traditional view of understanding of open source from Linux and stuff like that. Do you agree with that? There's a different dynamic in this with a very big compute and all.
But it's not only compute. There's also the sort of concentration of talent and I think it's, for instance, for me, it's in the past year, 2-3 years, that's become very clear. So the people, I don't work with AI people in Sweden or Europe, because they are in the US. The people, they are at OpenAI, they are at Microsoft. We have a close collaboration with Sebastian Bubeck with the 5.3 model. Working with the American parts, I get to meet Sam Altman and talk stuff through with him, while in Europe, Sweden doesn't exist.
So do you know, highlighting there's a completely different dynamic in this open source, because you have a super strong concentration of talent around this. That's sort of
and big investment.
So the normal open source
also
dynamics.
another dimensions to it. It was an article released just a few days ago where Daniel Ek and Mark Zuckerberg actually wrote an article in some Swedish newspaper, Dagens Nyheter or something.
No, it was American. It was for New York Times or something.
Okay.
So they took it over.
But that was really about regulations, and we perhaps shouldn't move into that topic right now, but it is connected to open source. So the article was about open source and how that influences companies. So if we have the new AI Act and how they are potentially regulating open source, they do have some clauses about not trying to regulate open source, but they still do. Yeah. And that will have big implications to Europe and Sweden. Yeah. And we'll see Meta, for example, are not releasing stuff to Europe just because of their fear of or insecurity about legal consequences for that. So, this could be a big influence on open source, because people are too afraid about the consequences for legal actions if you have it open source.
But at the same time, it also diffuses the regulation. Sort of once it's open and you get like 50 different clones, then it's...
Yeah, it will be fun to see what happens with the first court cases here.
Okay, so I have a moral question. Have you all signed up to be in the working groups around the AI Act's working group for Gen AI? Have you taken your responsibility?
No. But you have, I
Tell us.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be included, but I just felt like when I heard that there was going to be working groups around how to actually implement regulations around Gen AI, I contacted the people that I had top of mind and told them, please sign up, because I think this is really important. Because I mean, that's one of my sort of other things that I'm raving about. So it's the drunk uncle. And then it's that we need to take the responsibility as citizens of the EU and also participate in those discussions and try to drive it towards a more of a model that we think is reasonable.
So instead of bitching about it, really get them on board and try to make a difference and help out, to have the real experts really figuring this out. Yeah,
I think it's the difference of sitting in the back seat and asking, are we there yet?
But who reaching, this is a good one, shout out, who is driving the group and how does it work, who to reach out to?
Well, there was a website where you had to fill in a very complicated template and then click submit.
You lost me already.
Yeah, you lost me at hello.
See?
Just use ChatGPT.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but so can we conclude something on the open source, or you know?
Just go on. I think you put up the article there. It's just basically saying, you know, why Europe should embrace open source AI and the risk of falling behind because of the AI Act. But yeah, okay. Perhaps we should go into that.
Yeah, and it's paid thing, so I cannot even go in.
Paywalls
Oh,
everywhere.
paywall, yeah.
Okay.
But it's an interesting trend to watch out for.
Mm.
Can we elaborate anything on guidance to enterprise? You know,
But I think it's fun. If we move to one of the big stories of the summer, I think Llama 3.1 was one of them.
Yes.
So
let's go there.
because it has connection to open source, then, and I think it's fun because you know it was a super big one, 405 billion parameter model that has performance similar to the frontier closed models, and I think in some way I think Meta is thinking that it is a good thing from a competition point of view because it completely removes, or not completely, but partly removes at least the business model from OpenAI and others. Now a company can take this open source model and build something without having to pay OpenAI to do it, and they can build their own models and use that as a teacher for so many things they can do. So it's smart from a competition point of view, I think, for someone to push out the, you know, super performant models like this, right?
Yeah, although enterprises, I mean, have other parameters than cost.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure,
So exactly
sure.
for me to run Llama 405B models, it's much more expensive. So it's
Compared to like OpenAI.
yeah. I would have to have a supercomputer cluster and be able to manage the infra and everything, and it's so much easier to just call an API.
Mm.
So I would say that for enterprises, it's
Really hard.
it's
Even
hard.
from a cost point of view, it's still better to use OpenAI then.
I mean, if you go on a full Volvo scale of things for me, then of course it could be worth it. But for me, as having one team, it's just not worth it.
Interesting.
And I think when we started building machine learning models at SEB, I completely underestimated the amount of time it takes to maintain both the infrastructure and your proprietary models. And I think when you're doing the things that are core for your business, it makes sense to build it yourself because you want to be ahead of your competitors. So like a recommendation algorithm selling furniture, you want it to be the best. But then when it comes to other things, you definitely want to buy off the shelf because you don't want to end up maintaining some sort of a script somewhere that immediately everybody's going to forget, and then it crashes, and then somebody's angry, and that's never fun.
Or you can have a managed deep learning platform.
What are you speaking about? So in 5 years, what do you think the standard use case will be for like a company? Will it still be to use an API that you do that to even train the model or adapt it, or will you start?
In how long time did you say?
5 years.
It's impossible to say.
Impossible.
2 years.
I mean,
1 year.
in 2 years, probably still closed source.
But I think
API.
Luka already hinted at that there's things going on. So when we are setting our assumptions now, is don't really base them on the ChatGPT 3.5 or 4, because there's stuff happening now where token window like limitations we think are limitations will be maybe look different in just
I
within a
say
year.
One thing that Sam Altman said, and he said it publicly also, so it's fine to share. He said like GPT-3 was capable of doing 5-second tasks, basically something that takes a human 5 seconds. GPT-4 is good for 5-minute tasks. Anything beyond that, it's a bit sort of not good enough. And GPT Next, GPT-5, whatever it will be called, is capable of doing 5-hour tasks, basically.
Oh,
That's a big shift.
That's a big shift.
Yeah.
And for OpenAI, for everybody, the theme of the year is Agentic, meaning using agents.
So maybe that's the segue.
Yeah. Should we move into that?
So we talked about
topic?
open and all this. We closed that off, and you open up the new topic. The theme is Agentic, you said.
Yes.
What the hell is Agentic?
So a year ago, roughly a year ago, a bit after GPT-4 was released, there came this program called AutoGPT, which essentially it connected GPT-4 API to be able to do searches and execute commands and so on. So essentially it can do actions, so not just output text, but do actions. And what's more is that you could connect multiple agents together, working together, and building long chains. The thing is that it didn't work. It sort of, you could get it started, but it very quickly died out. And because the models aren't essentially good enough, smart enough, and when you start chaining them together, if it has 80% chance of being right, then the next level it's 80% of 80% and so on. So it dies out very, very quickly. And if you look at real world complex processes like enterprises or something like that, you have like many of these steps. So it wasn't really there. The technology wasn't really there. And a lot what's coming now is a sort of an improvement on that, sort of getting to reliability there. And also I think there will be a push generally. Right now people's experience with ChatGPT is that you type and it answers. So you take the initiatives. Here we'll go more to a system that autonomously work in the background. Not a big technological thing, but I think in terms of application and the way things.
Could we do a practical definition of agentic? I can do my layman's attempt, and please correct me now. That's the whole point. So the way I understand it is that you go from single task machines that you want to do something on a more complex problem or steps of problem, and then we understand that to build an agentic workflow, meaning you have several algorithms that are good at different things. You maybe have an ensemble or they're helping sorting out. So you have a combination of models that you want to work in an agentic workflow. And in that sense, you can then come to a higher abstraction level in terms of...
It's even weirder than that. It's not different models. It's actually the same model, just different other instances of the model that you've prompted slightly.
Yeah, okay. So so you can so it's a little bit like in the simplest terms. You ask, when you prompt something, you ask them to be 3 different persons doing 3 different tasks and work together as a team.
Yeah.
Is that simply summarized? Yeah.
I mean, a normal workflow is simply prompt some model to ask the question or to do something, and you get an answer, and then it's done. But by simply having that system to by itself take actions, which could be asking other prompts to itself or to other systems or to tools that it has, it can take actions basically, and then while or after having taken these actions, you do reply something. So it actually becomes able to take actions, which it didn't.
And I think it's a key word here to explain or discuss agentic agency. You know, that we are giving a clear frame for different agents to be good at or performing something with autonomy. Within this, they have agency for a certain thing, and then we are stringing them together. So I think this is a really profound thinking around agency and where this leads us. I think
actually it's an abused word. But I remember teaching in agent-oriented programming in 2003 or something. And
have you heard the term agentic before this year?
No, not agentic as phrased as, but agent-based.
Agent-based was the sort of usual, but this agentic, that's a new word for the year.
Yes, but I know you have worked a lot with this. What's your thinking about agentic system? And can you perhaps elaborate on something you have experimented with yourself?
I can start from where you started. I would agree that the current models aren't smart enough usually to handle agentic systems. But what has happened during this year is that there's been a lot of scaffolding being built. So people use Monte Carlo tree search, and they fine-tune on agentic traces and make the models a little bit better, and then we can get to something that's working relatively well. I saw a paper from Multion recently, an American company that does rather simple things. They do things like booking a table. That was an example from the paper, where they did this these scaffolding things after basically the LLM has said something, and then they can get from 19% on GPT 3.5 for some reason. They took that example in completing a booking task on the web. and then with the scaffolding, they could get it to something like 80%. So it's we're getting there, and with the help of better models, it can definitely go there. So what I'm working with is in my daily work is taking like the first level of GPT use and taking it into breaking down a task into subcomponents. And that works relatively well. And then you can sort of stitch it together with some scaffolding and get a decent result. But what I'm seeing right now is this is more a proof of concept, because everything will change with a better model. But it's a good time now, if you're thinking about Agentic, to start playing around with this and see the limitations. For example, if you're working with these multi-agent systems, then it's super hard to see what's happening. They will end up talking to each other and decide what is the best way to deal with a problem. And then there's a lot of chatter going on. And just to follow what's happened, why did this task derail? It's like you have to go through a list of prompts, and it's quite complicated. So it's good to get your sort of feet wet in this and see what are the basic limitations of it, and be ready for 2025. I think that's my guess.
And are you already thinking about like potential applications, or is it more getting to know? And can you talk about that?
I think I can talk about it. It's mostly playing around with it, but the obvious step from doing the sort of asking a single question and getting the agent to perform one action is you're going from doing tasks to doing roles. So you're basically taking on the role of, in my case, I'm trying to do a data analyst role.
Okay.
So if you take a high-level problem and try to break it down into multiple steps, and have something like a PDF report or whatever being delivered at the end, that's sort of doable today. But it's more mimicking sort of the style of some kind of worker, and that's the obvious first thing to do at least.
And as you said as well in the example, by having this kind of multi-step kind of agentic, if we call it that, for workflows, you can take a much less advanced and smaller model that will perform, if you do it in a multi-step way, in a much higher level. So you can actually get the models more efficient. You can get higher performance out with smaller models by putting them into agentic workflow. Is that what you're saying as well?
I think so, yes, if I followed you correctly.
I mean, it's an expansion of the chain of thought type thing.
Yes.
The models here, they don't, LLMs don't have the type of internal narrative that we do in our heads, but they think in what they write. That's the process, and this is just a generalized version of the chain of thought.
And look at, is there a certain, when we say agentic, because I think that's the whole thing that sort of blew up this year. I mean, you said it, agent-based programming has been on, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Is this different? Do we have a deeper meaning, or do we have a clear definition of agentic?
No, it's just that we have actually something that's capable of being an agent.
Yeah.
I think it's a nice term, and it's a buzzword, kind of thing.
So
I wouldn't spend too much time on the word itself.
No.
But it is a powerful technique still.
Yeah.
And I'm eager and going to, I know you're not going to answer Luka properly here, but I'm going to read your face the best I can. And of course we have ChatGPT and GPT-4o today, and we have the strawberry models and rumors, and we have the Orion model coming up soon perhaps. And one of the ideas, and I'm looking at your face right now, and the rumors is that the star in Q-star, which is the strawberry model, stands for the self-taught reasoner kind of approach. Poker face.
Poker face.
He blinked twice.
No, it's just like, I mean, you don't have to read into it.
Yeah.
You know what Q learning is. You know what A star is.
Yes.
Q star.
Yes.
So that's.
but Q star, I think is double meaning. One is the Q learning approach, and the Q star kind of optimal policy kind of meaning of Q star. But some people claim that the star could also mean something else, which is the star of self-taught reasoner. And there was a paper about that, where they tried to have a model trained by putting it into a loop, saying, okay, I have a question, I know the answer, but I want you to provide the reasoning for why this answer should be provided. And when it first tries to give some kind of motivation in chain of thought kind of thinking, it may be wrong, and then it throws it away, but it continues to loop until it gets the best kind of reasoning to say why this answer should be produced. And then it actually provides its own training data. So that means it is self-teaching itself, it's self-taught reasoner, STAR. And some people claim that that's what the strawberry is really all about. And if that is the case, it means that it can actually have a multi-step, similar to Agentic, kind of way to train itself, to build up its own training data, so it doesn't have to fetch all the data, and manual labeling is not necessary. It can actually produce its own training data and become significantly more intelligent, even more intelligent than humans, because you're not even dependent on human feedback anymore.
The 5.3 models are created, but the training data is done by GPT-4 for them.
Yeah.
So specifically prompted to create reasoning type of problems. And with them, the holy grail is to have a relatively small model that doesn't have all of the knowledge of the big models, but has the reasoning capability. So that's
But can we say with this?
Has to complete.
Okay.
What's your thought about strawberry?
I like strawberries.
Okay, sorry, Henrik, please continue.
No, but
We're not going to get an answer.
no, but I think, and then me and Luka were at the a conference in Göteborg that Chalmers organized around, I guess, digital product management. You were the star of the show. We were both friends of Jan Bosch. And I remember it quite vividly that sort of you were there presenting and talking about AI in product management and how King was doing it, of course. But I think the last part of that section was a little bit like you got into the core dynamics of Agentic. And what I took out of that, and I think I've seen that now from multiple sources, this is sort of my triangulating. What did you say? What is Andre Eng talking about? I feel very strongly that there is a move to that our systems most likely overall, the way we think about building systems, and now we're going to go all the way into enterprise in a certain years, this agentic thinking, this how you work there.
Why are you stuck on Agentic, by the way?
I think it's going to be huge. I think the logic of how we build systems changes.
I noticed that will happen.
It is, but I think that the fundamental point is that, and I think people get it now, but that wasn't obvious at the first, that what we're seeing with LLMs, the point is not that they can write a lot of text or code, it's that they are scalable reasoning engines. You have something that can reason and you can essentially infinitely scale it out. You can do as many copies as you want. And that's huge. Then comes sort of reality of how good they are at reasoning and things like that. But let's not go there.
Yes, but I know you have been thinking a lot about strawberries.
Yeah.
What's your thinking there?
I think it's obvious that it's some kind of inference time compute that's going to happen. That seems like a given.
Yes.
That's what I think. But
Just inference? Do you think training as well will have some kind of?
yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It's probably some kind of self-taught reasoning or something like that happens where you can create synthetic data that can overcome the problems of the limitations of human labeled data or human.
So let me play the
data.
ignorant. What the hell are we talking about? The strawberry thingy, and this is sort of the ideas and the rumors, whispers, and we are trying to extrapolate what this is all about. Can you just give us some small context?
I can give you, since I'm obsessed with the hype around this, I can give you the historical background of it. It started out by Q-Star was the first name for this, because that was something that was leaked from OpenAI. And then Altman more or less publicly said that that's true by saying that was an unfortunate leak. And then that died out, and after a while it came out that the new code name for Q-Star is Strawberry. I'm guessing that it's because it's very hard to get a large language model to answer how many R's are there in Strawberry. That's my thinking. And then the next thing that happened, somebody on Twitter that was called I Rule the World Mo. He said something about strawberry, and Sam Altman commented on that, and that was seen as he's right about that. So he got to be the strawberry man.
After this.
It's a fun evening time pastime if you want to read the rumor mill. But that's
and now we are trying to then extrapolate and guess what is
Yes.
in here. What is it? What can it do?
Yeah. And then the next thing that happened was that it was called something is called Orion, and the hype around that is there's some kind of strawberry model that will produce the output that is going to be trained, that is going to be used for training Orion model. That's the rumor mill.
I really hope that the communications and PR experts that are working around this project are getting well paid.
You know,
I mean, this is awesome, like, what do you call it, like dramatic kind of build-up for some big release. And
So
Yeah.
all of the OpenAI, or more or less all of the OpenAI and comms people are from Apple.
Nice.
Uh-huh.
That's why.
So it's,
good stuff. I mean, like they are brilliant. It's like the Elon Musk who doesn't pay for advertising, and it's this,
Yeah.
you know, doesn't pay for, you know, you don't need to. This is, you know, it's keeping its.
Salla, do you have any thoughts on this? You know, do you think Strawberry and the next release of GPT-4o or GPT-5 or whatever it will be?
But I'm such a bore in these circumstances because I turn into the hardcore theoretical mathematician that I was 20 years ago. I mean, so my supervisor had a favorite saying when I would come and use a very complicated theorem to prove a very simple thing. She'd say, "Now you're shooting doves with cannons," and I somehow took that to my heart because I enjoy elegance and I really want to, you know, sort of, I really love solutions that are as small as possible and as high quality as possible. And I agree that today we don't have to spend loads of time like correcting old reporting, for instance, but there's still certain situations where you really need to know, like in IKEA, you need to know exactly the weight of the furniture that you're going to send, and you need to know the size so you can do the cardboard. And yeah, so I think it's super interesting that we're sort of coming to models that can start to reason. And I'm really excited about that. I can see loads of really interesting applications. And then I think there's still so much more to be found. There's like, I mean, so one of my, apparently when I was still in risk control, quantitative analyst, they were talking about, big data and stuff. And apparently I put my hand up during this big meeting where they were talking about data quality and we're going to have to hire 100 people. And I'm the kind of person who can't stay quiet if I think they're going the wrong way. So I put my hand up and I said, I think we should just use machine learning because you can actually, you can systematically find the errors in the data and then you can systematically do something about the problems. And it was like this very quiet. So I think there are still a lot of applications, whether we call it AI or machine learning or something, where we could be doing so good things with a bit of elegance and not just taking out the cannon to shoot the doves.
But isn't that really where we could be moving now? Because, as we said, if we have this kind of multi-step, kind of more iterative reasoning kind of mechanisms, even some people, I don't want to name the name, are calling this symbolic approaches.
Yes.
Like Monte Carlo research, some people, I know you know who I'm thinking about, are calling that like a symbolic system. But you can even say that this kind of, added reasoning, iterative, both training and inference kind of steps that you have, adds more, what should you call it? I'm going to use symbolic because I can't come up with a better name. Some kind of more prior to it that allows the models to become smaller and more elegant. Yeah. And actually that can make it super much more efficient and more elegant. Yeah. So it could be in your direction, right?
Yeah, and I think, so at IKEA there was this amazing team of like 3 people, and they'd built a translation engine to be able to translate IKEA's product information from one language to another. Fantastic quality. They really struggled even to get access to GPUs. They really struggled to get budget. And I was like trying to do marketing for them. Like, we need to invest in this team. They're amazing. And then ChatGPT comes with a fantastic prompt, and then there's a central team, in essence, trying to do very similar things. And I'm like, but these people are already doing it. And it's very cost efficient. And it's like they've fine-tuned the model, so it takes incredibly low energy consumption. And so I think two things. I think one is great with Agentic, but I also think as data scientists and practitioners, there's a lot that we can learn about marketing, about storytelling, about explaining what is the possible in a way that is appealing to a human who's not as excited about AI as we are. And I think that, for me, was the main takeaway when the whole large language model thing exploded. That shit, that's what we should have been doing.
They were so much better at selling this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool.
Well, if it's anything that's clear, it's that it's very interesting times coming ahead, I think.
Yes.
And I mean short term, like coming months, right? And then, yes.
I'm not in charge of the timeline there.
You need to drink more beer, dude.
I noticed already that he's not drinking beer right now. He's clearly on a very strict diet today.
Should we try to find another topic? We spoke a lot about agentic reasoning, models becoming more efficient, having multi-step.
So I have another, just something that I thought about today, which is not large language. It's related, but diffusion models. So DeepMind released yesterday a paper, the demo of real-time generation of Doom, essentially playing Doom. So you could in real time play and it would generate. It's
like the infinite Seinfeld episode.
Yeah, exactly. But this is interactive.
Oh,
so it reacts to your input.
And just for information, there was a YouTube live stream where they used AI to continuously just generate Seinfeld episodes continuously for months. Okay, but this was interactive. And this was
interactive, Doom. Playing Doom, and it sort of looks exactly the same way. It could play 20 frames per second running on a single TPU. So it was sort of an efficiency bit. But it got me thinking of, like I've been seeing we've seen in the visual arts sort of image generation, how that has sort of, there's a big implicit understanding of things in these models. And then we have with audio, where it sort of it can compose music. And in this way, I thought games, like when you develop a game, with the complexity of it, where not just the design, but the AI of it, all of the aspects that you have teams thinking about, and this one just like generates image per image, and which implicitly has all of that.
Yeah. What do you think will be the future? Will it be that we're just filming and then building a diffusion model from that?
That's a question. Okay, I can see it like, I'm thinking out loud here. I mean, I can see for things like movies and games and so where the output is something that you just watch and sort of consume. Well, I'm wondering if this could apply to more general problems.
Yes. Yeah, I got the same thought. I was talking to Robert Luciani yesterday, and he mentioned this paper, so I'm happy that he tipped me. And it really got me thinking as well, like, what if all software is AI? I mean, you're not going to like this, because this is now we're really shooting with cannons. But we already moved from zeros and ones to machine code and to assembly to C++, and now we have all these layers, and we're doing very advanced stuff. We have a very advanced machinery to do relatively simple things in many cases. But what if in the future we don't have software? We just have a model, an AI model that can generate anything you want. Yeah. That's really mind-blowing when you start to think about that.
If you think, I mean, in the gaming instance, it's relatively simple to see from this example. Okay, now they traded the Doom, but imagine that they trained it on thousands of different games, and you give it a description. I would like to play a Candy Crush shooter that blah, 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 and then you play it in real time. Yes. And then say, okay, but let's not do Candy Crush, let's do accounting software.
Oh, God.
There is some nerds who love to play that game. But okay. But there is then, because what you open up the box now is a little bit another way of looking at trends, what happened by looking at slightly different industries. So you talked about gaming, What were the biggest steps we saw in music, for instance? I think there was a couple of different big releases of different types of products that is kind of starting to be mind-blowing about how you produce and develop music.
I would say music is the bit that I've been most impressed about, but
Exactly.
by the progress, because we went from like, oh, it can, after 10 hours of inference, it can generate a 60-second clip that you could, maybe sounds like a piano or something, you could hear it, to like,
Boom.
boom, the like complete compositions with musics and lyrics. I also demonstrated the power of multimodal models.
Was it in one of the bigger models, or was it also some products built on this? Because I saw a couple of different clips.
So it's Udio and Suno were the two.
Suno is the one I was thinking about.
I'm using Suno for like when having parties at home or something. And do you want me to play a song for you? And I'm like, yeah, search for this title. No. Tell me a song that you want me to create. And actually it works surprisingly well, even for dance band or this kind of top music genres.
So now you're with us. We talked about this already
I
for
know.
3-4 years ago. You've been waiting for this,
Yes.
so you can be a
But
musician.
it works surprisingly well. You just
Now
write a
it's live all
prompt.
the time.
And it can generate the instruments, the voice, the vocals, the lyrics, everything.
So you're
and
using
it
Sono
sounds good.
privately for fun, like
And
on a,
everyone
in a
loves
party.
it and said, oh, this is a song for you.
Yeah.
And
But
then
there is
it
a
has the
limitation
names
in
of it.
durability, right? Is it now bigger?
Sorry.
What's the
with
window?
Udio was like, I don't know, 30 seconds. and
No,
it
it
was
can
like
generate like Suno can generate like 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes.
full,
Yeah.
Full song.
Full song,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's a
Udio-
few seconds, like it's surprisingly fast.
So
And it sounds good.
and so this is the tip for fun.
Yeah.
Instead of having a music quiz night, have a music Sono night with your friends, right? And come up with the
And
best
for
song.
kids, I mean that's like,
So
I've
much
spent
fun.
so much with that, generating with music with them. That's with
And
lyrics.
is it expensive? I haven't used it yet. I'm so ignorant. So
I used it for free.
Use-
I have a lot of free credits there. So.
And you have this too. So you have Suno, which is it generates quickly, and is I would say sort of better at catchy sort of type of more pop dance band. I can see Suno really.
Excel.
It's kind of hard to understand, but really great music. So.
And then you have sort of Udio, which is very high quality.
Yeah, which is-
voices sound really realistic.
So which models has it that has been? There's one of these techniques that's gone more into the professional studios. More is this?
Udio.
Udio,
You
right?
have stems, and you can separate out. Yeah. And
But yeah, should we go back to the question about diffusion models? Because I think that's an interesting topic, and perhaps people should try to understand what diffusion models are. Do you want to give like a short intro to it, or?
Yeah, sure. Basically, it's a different type of neural network that's built on that you, rather than LLMs where you start to sort of chain things up of trying to predict the next token. Here you start, if you're doing, say, image, you start with noise. And then during inference, that noise gets more and more shaped into the actual end result based on the sort of conditions that the neural network provides.
I think it's interesting because it has a number of steps. It can't do things in a single prediction step. It has to be split up in like 50 or 100 steps. And what you do is you add noise to it and you learn to predict to remove the noise.
Yeah.
Surprisingly simple task. And that is actually, I would say, a way to reason in some way. Now it's simple, it's for images and audio, but it could be for other things in the future as well. So it's some kind of multi-step reasoning happening here, which is interesting. And there was this other of course, the Flux model.
Yeah.
The Flux 0.1 that Elon is now using on X and together with Grok 2. So they are using this model called Flux, and they use diffusion models as well. I don't recall, it was a time since I read it, but I think in short, they're using this kind of latent diffusion transformers. So the thing that they're doing is they are, this is a pet peeve that Henrik and I have been speaking about before. They're doing latent reasoning. So if they're not working on like the time or each audio sample in 16 kilohertz kind of room, they first move into latent space by using this kind of autoencoder to move that into some kind of much more compressed space. And in that kind of compressed latent space, then they do the diffusion process.
Yeah.
And by doing that, they can create pictures that are, I would say, state of the art right now in the Flux One thing. And it works surprisingly well. The interesting part here is also that there is no guardrails on this.
Yeah, I was just waiting for this. We're going to talk about the Kamala Harris Trump pictures.
But I think, for one, this is an area that I'm very interested in myself. I think it's wrong to do the reasoning, the multi-step kind of steps that we're now seeing LLMs taking. They are doing it in token space, right? And it works well because text has a rather high level of abstraction. It's not really sensory input. It's not like audio directly. It's not, pixel input. It's actually tokens that are rather high abstraction level on already. So then it works to do reasoning in token space. But for images, it doesn't work at all. And for audio, it does not. So they have to compress it first, and they have to move into latent space. And this is what Stability AI did for many years back, and that's why they got really good into this. Flux is actually built by the founders of Stability.
That was the argument, right? So Flux, they jumped ship.
But
even
Sora from OpenAI and others are actually moving in and doing the process, generation process in latent space.
GPT-4o, the
the DALL-E 3 thing.
No, not the DALL-E 3 thing, but the audio is a native modality.
Really?
Audio and vision,
I didn't know that.
So can I, just so I understand.
Yeah.
So you have your input data, bloop, and then you do like a tokenization or something, an abstract tokenization. So then you have a X-dimensional space, and then you look at the geometry of that space, or you. What is it? Then you apply some sort of machine learning model.
If you take
the shape of that space in itself, like the geometry, the topology,
that
should actually matter.
So machine learning is really about compression in some way. So if you take Flux One,
Yeah.
It moves from this kind of highly dimensional, two-dimensional images,
Yeah.
moves it into a much lower dimensional, two-dimensional representation.
And then
That means, it doesn't have the syntax of green, red, and blue. It's some kind of more semantic pixel in some way. And then it operates on these kind of latent representation.
Yeah.
Could you speak, Anders, to why latent space is better for reasoning? I think that's a good point.
Yeah, it's obviously so much more efficient. To try to do like reasoning where you have to generate every pixel every time for multiple steps would be extremely inefficient and very costly. So if you can avoid all the syntax, you want to remove the need for being able to encode things. You just want to do work on the semantics. So by removing the need to encode things into pixels or to audio space and just work in semantic space, where actually the semantics of text, images, and audio are the same, then it's much more efficient.
But you do also have that in the traditional LLMs and in the tokenization.
But the reasoning is happening usually in the token space because you have to generate one token at a time.
Yes.
Right.
So it's a little bit like doing PCA, but you have more complicated functions to collapse your dimensions.
If you remember word to vec.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
I think what Jan LeCun would say. He doesn't like the autoregressive nature of LLMs, and I don't either. If you can move the generating the next token out from the token space into the latent space, I think that would be an awesome.
What I'm thinking about, what I was looking for in your answer, and I may be wrong here. This is not my speciality, but I'm thinking that the latent space is easier because there's some kind of continuity here. It's like a neighboring points in the embedding space.
It's a manifold that's more easily.
Yes. It seems like it's a better place to do the reasoning in, because things that are close together in embedding space have similar meanings, and not just like the token distance.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would agree that the reasoning happens in token space. I mean, there's a deep neural net. Like you have a lot of different layers where you.
Of course, there is a part that happens in the latent space for. To the LLMs of today, for sure. So there is reasoning and there is a lot of stuff happening in latent space, but I think it could be significantly improved in efficiency if you don't have to generate the specific token every time. You should do the encoding from the latent semantic representation to tokens when you're done with the whole answer.
So the loop is inside rather than going out.
Right.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that be obvious more?
Yeah. So we talked about this before, and the thing that hit it for me was when you said that the training is done in token space. I mean, the loss function is in the training in the token space. That was what.
And this is exactly what Jan LeCun is speaking about in his JEPA models. The loss function is after you encode it into this energy landscape, and then the loss is just for the energy, errors. It's not in the sensory space.
That will sort of kill the sort of real-time aspects if you have to. Think about it before you think before you speak.
But I think for some tasks it can actually be faster as well.
And I think, I mean, this is a pet peeve that I have as well about real time. I think there's like this expectation that everything should be real time. And yes, when humans are interacting, but quite often it's enough to have a bit of a latency if it really saves you loads of money and it saves you a lot of effort. I like real time, but I don't think it's necessary in more than 1% maximum of applications.
Let me try out. I couldn't follow half of what you're talking about because I'm not a scientist here. But what I'm picking up, if I'm trying to zoom out, what Luka is bringing in here is that in this quest to be more smart and do it more efficient, there are magical things happening in different parts of the whole game. In terms of, we are learning more about diffusion models and can we move into latency space, and this is one type of technique, and this will solve some parts. And then we are moving over here, we talk Agentic, and then we are talking about the whole fundamentals of the LLM. So what I'm getting out of this conversation is that beware that the way the space is moving now, long time ago we were spread out on working on machine learning in many different ways, and then said, everybody's now working on transformers, blah, blah, blah. We're very converged on one type of approach. But now it starts to, once again, here in this neighborhood, there are different things that together will bring a better story. Have I understood sort of what when you highlighted the diffusion part here, it's a little bit like... I
mean, the big thing is that, say, in all of these cases, there's a big, deep neural network in the middle. Yeah. And generally, I think, at least for me, what's always been appealing with that is that it's not a special case. It's not sort of something that you hand engineer, but sort of the capability comes from implicitly from the structure. And now whether you have diffusion at the ends, or if you do Bert's-Tal masking, or whatever you sort of do, and those sort of different variations of interfaces to it. But the thing is the thing in the middle.
So the thing in the middle now centers the community on the thing in the middle. But now we can, in order to go further in generalization, in precision, we need to now work on the different things on the,
So every modern model like GPT-4 or Claude or whichever you choose, essentially throws the best thing, throw everything at it. So you have a combination of everything possible in there. So it's not like there's like Claude is purely simple token-based transformer LLM. No,
there are many things happening here.
Exactly. Especially those all the vision-capable models.
But I think this is a misconception, right? So in the general media now, it's transformer, and this whole nuance that we are bringing to the table here, I think is quite important when we understand where this is going. Or?
Yeah, I guess also it's interesting in the discussion of closed source versus open source, and how much we know what's going on.
Okay, so we were saying we were going to try to keep this episode short. We're into 1.5 hours now, and perhaps we can try to come to some kind of closing discussions. Could we perhaps have a short discussion just about like abuses of AI, the election time in US, and we've seen so many fun stories,
the Kamala Harris, Donald Trump pictures is, was that Grok, Elon Musk having no limitations, right?
There's videos as well now.
Oh, the videos, of course, I've seen it.
I can start a bit, and it would be fun to just hear, let's try to keep this discussion short, but still it would be fun to hear, what do you think the future will end up with? Will there be more abuses of AI, or will it actually be controlled by having AI controlling it somehow? Or what will the future be here? So in one, very interesting recent release was the Grok 2 model from XAI and launched on on Twitter, on X. And the different thing there was it's basically uncensored, and you can ask it to generate whatever text, but also images and videos. So they use this Flux one diffusion, latent diffusion model to generate really awesome looking pictures. And what were the examples? It was one, Trump going on the beach with Kamala Harris, kissing her,
Oh, it's even more.
touching her pregnant stomach.
Her pregnant belly hanging out. And with the Trump looking baby, there was many versions of this craziness. So people having fun and testing the model in the way that, of course, yeah.
What do you think about this, Grok 2 or XAI approach of having more or less AI model, generative AI without any kind of guardrails, good or bad? Salla, what do you think?
Oh. I was listening, so I need to now quickly think. No, but I think it's the drunk uncle, right? It's your drunk uncle comes to the Christmas party as an incredibly racist, horrible person, and then you know that. And I hope that in 3 years' time we'll have come to that realization.
Yeah.
I mean, I've found this fantastic podcast. It has nothing to do with AI, but it's called The Rest is Politics. And they have like these very well thought through discussions about political situation in Britain, and then there's one for the US. And it's like, it's what I grew up with. They have a discussion about history and how things connect and everything. And so I hope that we will be able to keep that part, because I think it's very important for us as humans to be able to have discussions where we don't always agree. And then I hope that we will be able to learn when is it the drunk uncle and when is it actually something that I should be listening to. And maybe I should be listening to drunk uncle sometimes because he might be right sometimes. But just sort of really understanding the probabilistic
So
approach.
if you label a piece of content, like an image or video, saying this is parody, this is not facts.
Yeah,
would that be okay then?
Yeah, that would be so much better than what we have today.
Yeah.
No, I think so. I mean, Aussie Man, the Australian Instagram guy, he did an apology from Australia for this breakdancer, Reagan, and people were like, I'm unfollowing you. And so he had to say, this is a parody.
This is a parody.
No, but I think it's important. Because,
But this is so tricky, because some of the best parody, the whole thing is about, we grew up with very ironic humor in Sweden with Killinggänget and everything like that. And the whole idea is that the kids love it because we understand irony, we understand this is fun, and there's always someone that gets itched by it. And if you get itched by it, you clearly are equally dumb, right? But the tricky point here is like will be no telling,
What I liked about the Grok 2 and the Flux One images is that it puts really the finger on that. This is now something that you have to think about, that anything you see can be false. It can be generated. So you will need to start questioning everything you see. And so that's what you're saying, basically, that there's a drunk uncle, and now you know it. Now everybody knows that there is a drunk uncle out there putting out images, and you will need to learn how to question the sources, and is this really true? Could this really be Kamala Harris and Donald Trump? You don't take images as proof anymore of anything happening. So that's good, because it's been happening for a long time, but it was a little bit harder before.
But you're making the point I was sort of joking about. I think in reality it shifts our abstraction level of how to understand and that we can take nothing for granted.
So I have a really good friend who lives in New York, and he's of course then bombarded by all the different fake media news, and for some reason he trusts me, so he sent me a link, and he was like, is it true that Alabama is reintroducing child labor? And I was like, that's a really good question. And so I went to the official governmental webpage for all the legal decisions that have been taken in Alabama during the last 5 years. There's incredibly bad search. It's almost impossible to find anything, like even just understanding the housing regulations. So I think what I'm hoping for is that the fact that we have this fake news situation and all the generated information is that our governmental agencies and people who actually should be sort of guarding the truth will
Yes.
have to invest into making their information easier to access
I love
and easier to find. I think
Great comment.
that's really important for democracy in general. Yes, I think so.
And in general, it's going to be about you're not going to you don't assume, you won't assume, you already don't today assume because there is an image that it's true. On the contrary, it sits in a neutral, undefined space, unless you have proof,
Exactly.
that it is. And there, I think we'll see new ways of sort of signing things of
Yeah.
digitally.
But the sooner we leave this false security,
But
and
who has that false security? Seriously, do you believe a picture that you see like, ooh, there's a photo, so it must be true?
I think a lot of people do.
You think so?
Yeah,
I think so
I think
too.
so.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think not here.
No.
Come on, not if you're an AI expert or in the AI space.
But I think it depends on the context. I mean, obviously, if Fox News shows an image, you will believe that it's true because you say, okay, it's a news agency. They won't lie, like-
Fox News, right? Yeah.
I picked the example on purpose. But,
I don't know, but I really like that this becomes super exposed. I saw a documentary where someone was sort of how do you this was a documentary of how they were. I think it was in somewhere, if it was Ukraine or somewhere where there were extreme amounts of propaganda. I can't remember which banana republic it was, and the core strategy was the way we're going to educate the masses is that we're going to expose them to how it works. We're going to expose them to something that is provocative that they get mad about, to make them build thick skin, so to speak. So when everything else gets bombarded, they can start judging, seeing this. And I think there's a spectrum now where, of course, the initiated has already passed this test. But if you look at the bell-shaped curve, where are we? Have we even reached the
but
majority?
do you need to fake images for that? Look at the sort of now Palestine-Israel conflict. One of the typical things that was sort of social media. Of course, I read this on BBC, so it might be propaganda. But they had these examples of where sort of the same images, like of a kid, were used on both sides with a different story.
Interesting.
So the sort of photo itself wasn't really relevant.
No, I agree with that. What we're talking about here is fake news and not necessarily fake images. But it becomes very vivid when you see the Grok 2 examples.
I think actually I'm positive in this. I think humans will adapt quickly and start to have the default thinking, is this really true or not? So the AI generation will move the default opinion in some way. So I think that's a good thing, actually. But I guess another question that I was thinking about really, should we do it the Google way or the XAI way? Should it be uncensored or should it have a lot of guardrails and biases built into it?
Before we get to that, I want to return the favor and look at your poker face and ask that.
Good luck with that.
Are deepfake images, are they a threat to Swedish democracy?
Let's move on to the next question. Let's see what I have here. That's a very good question. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for that.
But I'm sure that we all are aiming for a positive development of our society and democracy, and we should find the best way to do that. And to figure out how to get to a proper democracy and society, we need to figure out how we build AI models. Should they have built-in biases and guardrails, or should they be, as Elon Musk called them, truth-seeking? Maximally truth-seeking and uncensored.
But how is this truth-seeking?
I mean, okay, let's go the other direction. You know the Google Gemini, horrible example about, show me a picture of the godfathers of US, and they had like black women, being portrayed. And if you enforce that kind of strong bias into a model, that it becomes, fake. And certainly not true. That's not good either. So too much biases, too much force on diversity or whatever bias you put in there, or too much guardrails actually makes it censor stuff that actually should be put out. That's not good for sure. But then the question is completely uncensored also bad? I mean, if you were to produce like child pornography or something like that, that can't be good either. So, I mean, it's bad in both extremes, I would argue at least.
I think this is a very important question. Where do we stand?
Yeah. Jesper, where do you stand?
Yeah, I think I would probably place myself in the non-censored category. It's
more towards that.
Anything that tries to bias in any direction will always have artifacts. I don't think that's a good idea.
I kind of second that.
But I mean, the inherent bias in the model comes from your choice of data.
Yeah, exactly.
There will always be, but to put in some artificial bias seems like a bad idea.
But
Yeah. I mean, but it's also, I mean, depending on what part of the internet you scrape, you're definitely introducing a lot of bias. And I mean, because I think that's one of the sort of discussions that goes on sometimes about large language models, whether the culture of a country is inherently in the model. I mean, we know that there are examples of countries where there are very different cultures than the Nordic one, where they actually sort of require the models to be trained on their culture. And I would not like to go to that extreme either. So I think bit of both. I think the model, like the foundation models, probably great to use all the information, and then really use guardrails for fit for purpose.
But this is you're really opening up a really good nuanced discussion here, because we come all the way down to, languages. English is a commercial language. It has a depth around those areas. And maybe the Swedish language is stemming from different values, and so we had a guest here. What's her name at Rice? Johanna, and she had this obnoxious opinion that of course we want biased models. The values of in reflection of this value discussion and all that. And I think it's really tricky here.
What's your thinking, Luka? Guardrails or uncensored? No.
It's very hard. First, I don't think there's something as a neutral model, because it depends on the data that you train. And especially when you start gathering all the data that you can, all historical data, it's not going to reflect a really great value system for the AI to follow. So I do think that a minimum curation of the data is needed. The second thing, I know this for a fact, that companies building these models are deeply uncomfortable with having to take the responsibility of essentially enforcing values.
Yeah.
And that there should be a broader discussion about it, but it's not like I don't know, like I know. OpenAI, for instance, has among other things said that they do see like individual cultural adaptations of models as possible. So then I don't know, you have a Taliban model and then where do you draw a line? I don't think there's any good answer there.
But do we need a Swedish language model in order to have the core fundamental Swedish values and feelings? I mean, like we had all this great discussion with Erik Hugo. If you go to Greek, you have so many different names for blue, right? Because it's part of their culture, right? To understand all the nuances of blue.
Shove it in the training data out of the biggest model of them all, and you can get it.
But maybe that's the way to go, right? So instead of having a Swedish model, maybe we need to have a fine-tuned. I don't know. Do we need fine-tuning for Swedish?
Yes.
Definitely.
I think we would need fine-tuning for every specific purpose we want to use it for.
This is a good answer.
Yeah, but I mean, then it's the purpose that you're using it for that you need to train the model for. I just remember when Google Assistant was released for the first time, and we got some sort of a pre-test at SEV, and I was invited to be in the test group, and I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds fun. And then I'm standing outside the room where we were going to test it, and the other Finlandssvensk comes in, and we're like looking at each other like, did not understand what I was saying. So I mean, in that sense, if we're going to use it in governmental agencies, if we're going to use it for making our systems for offentliga more accessible,
Yes.
then yes, we need to invest really into seeing to it that it can understand people with speech impediments and people with different dialects. And then I think it's super important to spend the time to find to.
Included in the more general.
So far, no.
If you look at
In the future, maybe.
like 3.5 GPT 3.5, like really bad at Swedish. GPT-4 was better, but still, sort of, if you ask it to write a good bedtime story for the kids, it would be not really sort of nailing the language. GPT-4o a bit better. Claude, significant improvement.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking these big.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting better, definitely.
Cool.
Sorry.
I think I'm not sure what the answer here will be, but some kind of lagom, as they say in Swedish, perhaps could be a good one. Anyway, it will be an interesting future, as we said many times before. I'm thinking about how to end it. Should we do it the same way as usual, just asking for the future and thinking there in a short way?
Okay, let me have a go at it.
Okay.
Based on this discussion and our general feeling or summary of the recap of the year so far, how do we change our ideas, or how we fine-tune our view of the future of the vision in relation to, you know, are we going more darker in relation to the consequences of AI and AGI, or are we more positive, or has something in this year sort of?
Well, I guess that's a good way to phrase it. I mean, if we think about the scale of the utopian versus the dystopian future, when AI will potentially be AGI or super intelligent, have you in the last year or over the summer moved more towards utopian positive or more towards a dystopian negative kind of future?
Is it piling up on the plus side or the minus side?
Okay,
so far.
Yes, that. So if you're looking at AGI, then the sort of utopian and dystopian are a mirror image, like the potential for. But I would say on the we're gonna get run over by deep fakes and fake articles, and that's gonna destroy democracy. I'm more on the positive side now. I think at least what I.
It's already here, and we're already managing it.
Yeah.
Are we?
No.
Just sort of just looking as a reference points of my kids who think like DALL-E and generating out images that automatically, or music is just perfectly normal. That's nothing strange about it. That we adapt fairly quickly to technology, and this is it shifts things a bit, but we'll adapt to that bit.
But nuance, we haven't solved it at all, but we are adapting day by day to it. That's what I was trying to say.
Mm.
So I would go more on the utopian side. Still on the large existential bits, unchanged.
But is it unchanged the way you have viewed? I believe I asked you this question way back, but it hasn't really shifted.
No.
What about you, Salla?
I think when it comes to the expectations on LLMs in general, I feel like it's starting to sober up. People are starting to see some applications that can be interesting, but it's not as sort of insanely AGI will be here next year, which I think is good, because let's be balanced humans.
Cool.
And I'll stop there.
If AGI will be here in 3, 10 or 30 years, have you moved more towards a positive or negative view of that future?
I think I'm still equally skeptical to why we would do that, because I don't really see the value of it. As a business person, I don't think we, at least in industry, do things that don't create business value. We might try to do it for a couple of years, and then it gets shut down for budget reasons.
I wish I could continue speaking about this. We will continue after the camera shuts off. Jesper.
I think I'm also so to be frank, the reason that not much has changed is because the field has not evolved. The models are still the same. So there's not so much that has changed on maybe the feeling now is that since things are moving more slowly, it could take longer. That's sort of the general feeling. Then we have some other thinking that might indicate that it's not going slow. But I think that the main problems are still unsolved. I think fake news, fake images, that's a problem, but we've lived with that for some time already. I think we will adapt to that. I think the main problem is if we really get to AGI, what will we do as a society? And I see no thinking around how we will solve that. We were talking about UBI before, universal basic income. What happens when the AI can do 90% of all the jobs? Some will be quick to adapt and will find their feet quickly and know what to do. But for the people that don't go into AI and don't learn these things and aren't on the bleeding edge of technology, I don't see what we will do as a society to solve those things. And that is my...
What do you do on a weekend, Jesper?
What I do on a weekend?
Can't you simply do more of that?
Yes, definitely. The thing is, I don't see any solutions. I don't see anybody working on solutions in the society. I'm talking about people getting unemployed and finding no value in life. If we can solve that through basic income, I don't think that's the solution. It could be in some form, but I hear no thinking around that. That is my biggest fear.
I'm biting my tongue here, but I guess we should.
But I'm positive, but that's just because I'm positive about technology and future. But I see great challenges that I see no solutions to.
Can I, as a way to give my answer into this, I'm trying to figure out if there is a new burning, pressing topic, or because sometimes we get into this philosophical AGI discussion, it almost feels like it's blinding us to some of the real stuff we should be talking about right now. So I've been kind of thinking, to answer that question, is there anything that has sort of moved up on the agenda that I think is way, way more important that we should be discussing and arguing about, or debating, or trying to find solutions around based on this year? And I think, to me, that's why I've been circling back to this whole agentic thing, because the whole.
You should have a T-shirt.
Yeah, I will have an
Agentic Henrik.
No, I will have a T-shirt called Agentic Reform, because I think the way we have structured public sector, the way we have structured enterprise, has not really discussed agency and how we understand ownership and mandates and accountability and autonomy.
Can't we simply use the same way of working as we do for humans, but for AI systems as well?
Yeah, exactly. But there needs to be an alignment here around agency between the agentic AI systems and the teams who have agency. And I don't think the way we have organized division of labor fits anymore with this agentic view. So I think we are moving into a way where we have systems making decisions. So automation on one layer has moved up the augmentation on a higher abstraction layer. So we are automating stuff, and we can have decision making in our systems. But the way who is making the decision and how have we distributed decision making in organizations is not really agentic. It's division of labor. I
think that's very depending on the organization and the culture in the organization.
Not really. It is really deeply rooted in.
I would like to cite also Jan LeCun one more time. But he basically says, we have been working with intelligent agentic people for thousands of years, and we have developed ways to do that. And why should not those rules and way of working work for intelligent agent or agentic agent as well? I think that's an interesting question. So I'm hoping, we'll not develop special rules for AI too much.
No, it's not about special rules for AI. It's about cohesion.
Let me close this on a much more darker note.
Please.
No, but one of the reflections that I made this year was again when the whole Israel-Palestine thing, where I was frankly embarrassed to be human.
Okay.
I was like, okay, we're talking about here AI ethics, and we humans haven't got the basics in place. We're killing each other like crazy. And are we really ready for? How can we possibly teach AI what good ethics is when we don't know?
How can we teach AI systems about decision making when I don't think we are doing it so well?
That's an awesome way to end the podcast. I think it's a very profound way, at least. Thank you very much, Luka, for that great ending and the rest of awesome discussions as usual. Salla, thank you very much, as usual. Great to have you here. And Jesper,
Thank you.
awesome to have you. And I'm really looking forward to the after work now to continue the discussions. And thank you as well, Henrik. Great to see you and Goran again.
And I concur.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.